Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I give so much thanks and love to the organizers, my friends, Simone and Rashida, every one of the vast team that has been part of this in all kinds of levels, and just the great gift it is to be here with all of you. A lot of the work that I've shared publicly has to do with other places where I'm a stranger, and also with a sense of deep engagement with history. And I was going back and found something that I've never read publicly before, that is a bit more of a personal history and about home. We were not raised in the street. Many afternoons of childhood were spent at the windowsill with the curtains draping our backs like cloaks. There, we peered through mesh, through square panes, beyond the hedge guarding the front porch, across the yard, and into the street. It was a small yard, but it seemed to slope away from the house like a vast plain running toward the horizon. It was a busy street, and there was no sidewalk. This was cited as one of the reasons for our confinement. Our street lay perpendicular to another road. Our house sat at the dead end where they met. At the intersection was a bus stop. The windowsill offered a view onto the crowds of teenagers deposited there daily with after-school courting rituals and the occasional battle royale. Also across the street was a rundown house that was often the setting of some dramatic scene, the matriarch habitually carried away after midnight by an ambulance or sudden threats in broad daylight. One daughter brandishing a knife at another in the front yard. At least twice, a speeding car came down that oncoming road, and as if the street continued, carried into our yard, mauling a tree, stopping just short of the house. We went to the window to see what was the matter. There, at the windowsill, we learned to observe, but not to participate. We were not a part of the life going on outdoors, so that on the few occasions we ventured out for a walk with our mother to visit a neighbor down the road, we went like strangers who did not know the way. The scale of the neighboring houses looked different on foot than from the window of our passing car. At the windowsill observatory, nothing was complete. You did not have access to the beginning, middle, and end. At least one element of that sequence would always remain unavailable. You had the climax. You had the headlights from a crashed car shining into the bedroom window, the flash of the blade in the sun, the muffled shouts of the crowd swooning as the first blows fell. You relied on speculation to make up for what was not seen. The car provided another view. Anything appearing on the highway or street had the quality of an image whirling round a zoetrope, the eyes scanning the scene before it whips out of sight. The disappearing image persisted by way of willful grasping, not an involuntary optic trick. Beyond the car window were the fields that ran alongside the highways, undeveloped tracts of land connecting one part of the city to the next, strung with electrical wire atop towers. The landscape was dotted with contraptions prospecting for oil. Cows or horses were turned onto the disused fields, feeding on the brush among signs offering the acreage for development. There were not roads to carry us into those vistas. The distance seemed unfathomable. There was never a figure by which to set a scale. But once I looked out the car window and did see a figure in the distance, a boy in a tracksuit straddling a pipe that spanned a bayou. He was scooting his way across the pipe. It was a place we passed daily on the way home from school, but I had never seen a figure in that scene, and I didn't alert anyone else in the car to what I saw. Instead, I wondered, was it a dare? There were no witnesses gathered round to see the deed accomplished. Was he trying to escape? There were no pursuers. Did he survive the crossing? We continued on, and I left him there, alone on the pipe, his endeavor unaccomplished. My brief witness could not provide an account of heroism or attest to last moments or teenage folly. There were other stories like that, with parts missing because you'd arrived in the middle or hardly arrived at all, your eyes happening upon the spot, then your body carried away by the moving car. I have a friend who grew up here, and when the city was still wild, in some places unpaved, not yet disciplined into the current municipal order. As a boy, he used to walk across town as one of a group of friends making expeditions from the Fifth Ward on the city's northern side to the south side of town, the location of my childhood windowsill. Now there is a highway that covers the passage from north to south that my friend made on foot. Several dozen houses were destroyed to build it. The houses that were not taken over sit uncomfortably close to the highway's edge, so that if you didn't know the houses had been there first, you'd wonder why anyone would choose to build there. Now there are condominiums purposely built right upon the highway, with balconies advertised as having breathtaking views. But some of the roads walked in my friend's childhood are still there. I've always been fascinated by the name of the Old Spanish Trail, a street name that manages to be both vague and precise. It was an old story preserved despite the dive bars and strip malls, covered wagons replaced by joyrides and drag races next to the park. Some of the roads are gone. I think of the bricks of Anderson Road, paid for and laid one by freedmen because the city preferred to leave them with dust. When the old houses of that area were all finally gone and the new buildings made of metal, referred to as lofts, sprang up to replace them, you knew the bricks that had been there more than a century would soon be pulverized. In a city where history is constantly subject to the bulldozer, the only thing unchanging from my friend's childhood to mine was the sky up above our heads. Later, we moved to another street and another windowsill. The view from there also presented us with across-the-way neighbors who enacted regular ritualized purges of familial demons. These scenes drew one out of bed to the front window, the interior lights unlit, to look through the lace and many blinds, a permanent crimp formed in the blinds to accommodate the peephole fashioned to watch the brothers swear eternal enmity in redundant arguments on Saturday night. It was, otherwise, a quiet street. There was a man from the very end of the block who rode a bicycle too small for his size. Seeing him pedal down the street with knees making room for his belly, one thought of a circus clown. He always waved and always smiled. There was the man from across the street, father of the dueling brothers. Once, walking on the street to the bus stop, I saw him up close for the first time after many years of watching them through the window. The distant vantage point had made me an expert in his gait and the slope of his shoulders. He walked like a man who was both broken by his family's perils, but whose brokenness were the cause. Long before we were upon each other, I recognized him from afar. When our paths finally met, he nodded hello. I was startled at the face that greeted me. I did not know it. His eyes were yellowed, his face deeply creased. These were details not visible through the blinds. There was another neighbor whose walks I'd observed from afar long before coming face to face. I had seen her from the window and from the passing car. Her appearances in the street did not follow the pattern of a worker headed to the bus stop or fulfill any other purpose. She never carried bags from the convenience stores and fast food establishments located at the end of our block. She walked in the middle of the road, but the approach of a vehicle never seemed to startle her. She made way and then regained the center. Walking with the languid pace of a sleepwalker, she didn't seem to be pursuing exercise. She could be seen mornings and afternoons, but never after nightfall. She never turned into a yard making neighborly calls. Instead, her walks were more like promenades, more so because she was always dressed for the occasion. Invariably, she wore all red shirt, red shorts, red socks, and red shoes. Another variation was a red dress with red pumps and a red pocketbook. Often, and this seemed to be her trademark, she wore a red ribbon wrapped around her head with a long tail tumbling down, dusting the backs of her knees, ceremonial. Once I passed her while walking. She did not wave or in any other way acknowledge our crossing, unusual in this city of so few walkers. To find oneself in the middle of a street, temporarily emptied of cars, a body moving on its own power, not hurtled through space, is to feel part of a fraternity, people who kept measure of the city by their paces. It was also a fraternity of the poor, looked upon piteously from passing cars. I felt rebuked when she did not speak or even nod. Observing her for so long had produced a one-way intimacy. Her eyes met mine without a hint of acknowledgement. She did not recognize the feeling of my eyes. Sometimes we would not see her. For some months, she would disappear altogether, but her absence was not missed until she had appeared again. Oh, there she is. Where had she been? Any variation in dress was noted. Eventually, my mother heard a snippet of her history from a neighbor. There had been a car accident many years before. That was the reason she was the way she was, unsmiling and eternally red. One resorted to speculation to fill what could not be seen. Immediately, I conjured a circumstance to fit the few available facts. The accident had happened while she was escaping from home. Perhaps she had snuck out in the night, walking to meet a car waiting around a corner. It had arrived coasting and with headlights dimmed. Someone watched through the blinds as she went, or else she went slamming doors in defiance, waking the neighbors who were used to watching her leave like that, always wearing that red dress. It had all been arranged in advance. My scenarios did not determine whether she was running from something or running to something, but she had declared that she was never coming back. Then they were off. In the dead of night, the highway is all lit up, empty and glorious, her hand stretched out the window, catching gusts of air. It had all been arranged in advance. The route had all been worked out. Soon, she was carried back the way she came. It was more than I could see from the windowsill. I decided that in those walks up and down our short street, she was retracing her steps, reenacting her flight on the open road that is now her mind. Thank you.